When the cameras turned off and the set lights dimmed, no one expected Kirk Frost to deliver a bombshell that would change everything. For years, his relationship with Rasheeda has been at the heart of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, tested, rebuilt, broken again, and somehow always surviving. But now Kirk has stepped into a whole new storm. In a moment no one saw coming, Kirk publicly announced that he has married Jasmine Washington. The crowd froze. The cast went silent, and Rasheeda. She broke down in tears right there, surrounded by friends, cameras, and a million unanswered questions. What led to this? How did Jasmine go from scandal to bride? And what does this mean for Rasheeda, for the family, and for the show that built them all into household names? This isn't just gossip. This is the turning point fans will never forget. Hashtag Kirk Frost at VH1 at RASHEEDA. To understand the magnitude of Kirk's announcement, we need to rewind. Kirk Frost has always been a complicated figure on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. On screen, he was both a devoted husband and a man surrounded by whispers, cheating rumors, questionable choices, and the kind of quiet tension that fuels entire seasons of reality TV. Rasheeda, on the other hand, carried the weight of public perception. She was the wife, the mother, the businesswoman, balancing a career, a marriage, and a cast that thrived on conflict. Together, they were complicated but compelling, a couple people rooted for even when they fought. Then came Jasmine Washington. When Jasmine entered the picture, the internet lit up. First, there were rumors of an affair. Then, allegations of a child. Hashtags flew across platforms. Hashtag Kirk drama. Hashtag RASHEEDA strong. Hashtag who is the father. For months, the story dominated headlines both inside and outside the VH1 bubble. Every new episode promised a new angle, a new reaction, a new confession, but no clean ending. The baby storyline hung in the air like a storm cloud that never cleared. Eventually, the cast seemed to move on. Rasheeda and Kirk worked on their marriage. They presented unity, even laughter, as though the roughest parts were behind them. Fans were divided, some praising Rasheeda for fighting for her family, others criticizing her for forgiving too much. But ratings stayed strong, and for a while things seemed to stabilize. Until now. Kirk's announcement wasn't whispered, in a corner. Wasn't a leak, a rumor, or a blurry Instagram live. It was a public declaration at an event with cameras, co-stars, and people who knew exactly how much damage one sentence could do. "I've made a decision," Kirk reportedly said, standing in front of a stunned crowd. "Jasmine and I are now married." The room froze. Some thought it was a joke, a bad one. Others assumed it was part of a scripted storyline. But then the details came. A quiet ceremony, done legally, away from Atlanta's chaos, with paperwork already filed. Jasmine Washington for years. The other woman in a messy triangle was now legally Kirk's wife, and Rasheeda. Witnesses describe her reaction as immediate, raw, and heartbreaking. Tears streamed down her face as she stood frozen, trying to process what had just been said. Friends rushed to her side. Cast members exchanged nervous glances. The cameras kept rolling. Reality TV thrives on moments like this. But Rasheeda wasn't performing. This wasn't a storyline. This was her life unraveling in real time. Social media detonated within minutes. Clips of the announcement spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram before the event even ended. Comments poured in by the thousands at Rasheeda. "You deserved so much better. Hashtag team RASHEEDA. This man just married the woman who broke up his family." Hashtag Kirk Frost. "This better be fake for ratings or I'm done with hashtag LHHATL." Bloggers dissected every second of footage, pausing. On Rasheeda's face, on Jasmine's expression, on the cast's awkward silence. Was this a betrayal years in the making? Was it redemption for Jasmine? Right. Was it, as some speculate, the biggest Love and Hip Hop storyline twist in franchise history? What makes this announcement even more shocking is its permanence. Affair can be denied. A rumor can be spun. But a marriage is paperwork, signatures, rings, something that can't easily be undone or hidden. It isn't just an emotional wound. It's a legal shift, a symbolic declaration that Kirk has chosen Jasmine publicly, permanently, and unapologetically for Rasheeda. The pain wasn't just about losing her husband, it was about the way it happened. No warning, no conversation. Just a headline dropped in the middle of a crowd for the world to consume. People close to Rasheeda say she kept asking one question through tears. Why like this? Fans are already speculating on what happens. Next, will Rasheeda leave the show? Will Kirk and Jasmine return as a married couple? Will VH1 turn this heartbreak into the centerpiece of a new season? In the world of reality TV, tragedy and ratings often walk hand in hand. But even seasoned producers are said to be stunned by this development. For now, Rasheeda has gone quiet online. No posts, no statements, just silence. The kind that feels heavy, intentional, and filled with private conversations that may never reach the public. Kirk has posted nothing either. Jasmine remains off the grid. But the internet is loud enough for all three of them. This announcement isn't just a twist. It's a cultural moment for love and hip-hop Atlanta. A decade-long saga of love, betrayal, reconciliation, and now complete reversal. Whether this is the start of a new chapter or the end of one entirely. One thing is certain, fans will not forget the day Kirk Frost told the world that Jasmine Washington was now his wife and Rasheeda. The woman who stood beside him through scandal after scandal, left in tears. #Kirk Frost, #Jasmine Washington, #RASHEEDA #LHHATL drama at VH1, at Levon Hip Hop, at Rasheeda, at Frost 117. When a story like this explodes, doesn't just affect the people at the center. It sends ripples through families, friendships, businesses, and a fan base that has spent years investing emotionally in these characters. The night after Kirk's announcement, phones lit up. Producers started scheduling emergency calls. PR teams scrambled to draft statements that said enough to calm people down, but not so much that they locked anyone into a legal corner. Inside Atlanta's tight-knit entertainment circle, the whispers were relentless. Some insiders said they'd seen this coming. They talked about quiet dinners, late-night text chains, moments when Kirk and Jasmine seemed closer than co-parents normally would be. Others insisted they were blindsided, that they genuinely believed Kirk and Rasheeda had turned a corner, and that all three adults had found a way to coexist without reopening old wounds. Fans, meanwhile, didn't wait for facts. They built their own narratives. Twitter threads started with screenshots. Kirk spotted near Jasmine's neighborhood. Jasmine wearing what looked like a ring in a photo from weeks earlier. A behind-the-scenes clip where Kirk seemed distant at a family event. The #Kirk wedding trended by morning. Memes appeared, some cruel, some funny, all adding fuel to a fire no one could control. One of the hardest parts of any reality TV scandal is figuring out what's real and what's for ratings. Love and hip-hop thrives on heightened emotion, but at its best, it's built on real people going through real things. By midweek, commentators, bloggers, and even other cast members were weighing in. If this is a storyline, it's genius. If it's not, it's heartbreaking. At Real Litter Capper, can't believe we're watching a marriage implode in real time. Protect at Rasheeda at all costs. At Fangirl ATL, this ain't TV anymore. This is people's lives. At Street Talk KO behind closed doors, Rasheeda's inner circle tried to create a safe space. Friends described her as numb, someone who kept replaying the announcement in her head, trying to decide whether to go public, to go private, or to walk away from the spotlight altogether. Sources say she told a friend, "I built a life with him in front of millions, and now he's tearing it down the same way in front of millions." Kirk, for his part, reportedly told a mutual acquaintance that he couldn't keep living in limbo. That the decision to marry Jasmine wasn't meant as an attack on Rasheeda, but as a way to start over clean. Whether that explanation holds any emotional weight for fans or for Rasheeda is another story entirely. VH1 executives were reportedly split. Some saw the situation as an unavoidable disaster that needed careful management to avoid damaging the brand. Others saw it as lightning in a bottle. Painful, yes, but undeniably compelling television. They debated whether to accelerate filming, to craft a special, or to let the dust settle first. Someone reportedly said in a meeting, "We're not just telling a story anymore. We're dealing with fallout that could affect contracts, reputations, even custody." Legal teams began checking timelines. Was Kirk married while still legally bound to Rasheeda? Were there assets, businesses, or contracts that would be impacted by a legal split? In reality TV, off-screen reality can collide with production reality in ways that get very expensive very fast. Meanwhile, Jasmine stayed silent, a silence that fans interpreted in every possible way. Some said it was classy, that she was avoiding pouring salt into open wounds. Others accused her of hiding, of letting Rasheeda take the public hit while she enjoyed private victory. Either way, the quiet only made the noise louder. By the weekend, paparazzi had staked out every known address. Camera crews weren't far behind. A single photo of Rasheeda entering a lawyer's office went viral, even though no one could confirm whether it was for personal, business, or family matters. The caption wars began: divorce coming, contract negotiation, custody battle. At LHHATL's official account posted a neutral statement. "The Love and Hip-Hop family respects the privacy of our cast during difficult times. Will continue to share their journeys when and how they choose." LHHATL fans weren't satisfied. They wanted clarity, not corporate distance. They wanted someone to pick a side, to say plainly what had happened. Who was hurt, who was wrong, and whether the show they loved was about to lose one of its core couples for good. The human cost of this moment is easy to overlook amid the hashtags and hot takes. But in homes across Atlanta, kids were asking questions. Friends were choosing sides. Business partners were reviewing contracts. And in the middle of it all, 3 adults who have lived much of their personal lives on camera were suddenly dealing with a crisis too raw, too messy, and too emotional to script in the background. Music blogs started asking whether Rasheeda would return to recording. Fashion pages speculated whether her brand would distance itself from Frost-affiliated projects. Event planners whispered about upcoming appearances, whether they'd be canceled, whether the guest lists would change, whether any of this would spill into public spaces. A crisis like this doesn't stay contained, stretches, twists, and finds its way into places no one expects. By Monday morning, a major gossip site reported that offers had already been made for exclusive interviews that could shape public opinion for months, maybe years. Rasheeda's team, according to insiders, was carefully considering timing, tone, and truth. Aware that one wrong word could inflame an already volatile situation. For now, the only certainty is uncertainty. Kirk's announcement may have been the first domino, but what falls next? Careers. Marriages, friendships, brands depends on choices still being made in real time. Under the glare of a million curious eyes, hashtag Kirk Frost, hashtag Jasmine Washington, hashtag Rasheeda, hashtag reality TV drama at VH1, at Lavonde Hip Hop, at Rasheeda, at Frost117 by Tuesday. The story wasn't just about a marriage anymore. It had become a cultural talking point. Talk radio shows, morning TV, gossip segments, and even a few mainstream news outlets picked it up. When reality TV crosses over into mainstream conversation, it usually means one of two things: a moment of pure comedy or a moment of deep human drama. This was the latter. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to the timeline. They mapped out when Kirk and Jasmine first met, cross-referenced filming schedules, and speculated on whether this marriage had been quietly in the works for months. Reddit threads went deeper still, with amateur detectives creating flowcharts and citing sources who may or may not have ever met anyone involved. It was messy, obsessive, and exactly what happens when a fandom feels blindsided. Through it all, Rasheeda stayed quiet. That silence became its own narrative. Some fans, it was a sign of strength, a woman choosing dignity over spectacle. To others, it was frustrating. They wanted a statement, a post, a single sentence to tell them how she was doing. Dud. People close to her described a private period of regrouping. She was, according to one friend, trying to figure out how to protect her family while standing up for herself. Jasmine, too, said nothing. No celebratory posts, no cryptic quotes. It was as if both women understood the gravity of the situation, that anything they said publicly would be frozen, screenshotted, dissected, and possibly used against them later. In an era where every word becomes a headline, sometimes the most strategic move is silence. Kirk, for his part, reportedly reached out privately to Rasheeda. Multiple sources confirmed that he had asked to meet in person to explain his decision directly. Whether that meeting ever took place is unclear. One insider said she didn't want a conversation that could be turned into content. She wanted space. Meanwhile, producers faced a dilemma: ignore the biggest storyline to ever hit the franchise, or lean into it in a way that didn't feel exploitative. Meetings were held daily. Editors were asked to review existing footage. Could they reframe the current season? Could they build a special episode that acknowledged what had happened without re-traumatizing anyone? One producer reportedly said, "We've built a career on showing people's lives. This is their lives, just uglier than usual." In Atlanta's nightlife, the situation became a frequent topic. DJs made jokes. Promoters debated whether inviting any of the trio to events would be seen as loyalty or disrespect. Reality TV blurs the line between celebrity and community. Everyone feels like they're a part of the story, even if they're just watching from the sidelines. Now, that line was paper thin. Legal experts chimed in online, offering analysis. That blended entertainment law with gossip. If Kirk and Rasheeda were still legally married when he married Jasmine, it could lead to annulments or even criminal charges, depending on jurisdiction. Others pointed out that paperwork lags often mean the emotional end of a marriage happens long before the legal one. Didn't matter. Speculation is louder than paperwork. Brand managers watched closely. Rasheeda's boutiques, collaborations, and appearances were tied to a personal brand built on strength, hustle, and partnership. Would this betrayal damage that brand, or would it strengthen it, painting her as a survivor of public heartbreak? Meanwhile, Kirk's name was trending, but not in ways that sponsors love. Silence can sometimes preserve value. Bad press rarely does. Fans began choosing sides in increasingly vocal ways. Some posted long messages of support for Rasheeda. At Rasheeda, you've inspired so many of us to keep going even when life throws shade. You'll come out of this even stronger. Hashtag Team Rasheeda. For others defended Kirk, arguing that relationships are complex, that no one outside the marriage knows the full story. People need to stop acting like they live in that house. You don't know what went on. Maybe this is peace for everyone involved. Hashtag respect privacy, and a smaller but loud segment threw their weight behind Jasmine, arguing that she'd been vilified for years and was now finally being acknowledged as someone Kirk truly loved. Y'all dragged at Jasmine_Washington for seasons. Now it turns out she wasn't just a fling. Maybe the hate was misplaced. Hashtag justice for Jasmine in group chats and forums. Debates turned emotional. Some questioned what this meant for love and hip-hop as a franchise. Others reflected on how hard it is to separate scripted tension from real heartbreak. A few simply stepped back, admitting they didn't know how to feel angry, sad, entertained, or all three. Meanwhile, in the real world, off social media, off TV, people closest to the situation tried to create a buffer. Children had to be protected from the noise. Legal documents had to be reviewed. Personal items may have been moved, accounts frozen. Decisions made quietly in kitchens while the public roared online. Through it all, the timing of Kirk's announcement stood out. Why now? Why in public? Why without warning? Even people who sympathized with him struggled to understand the delivery. One cast member, off record, said, "You don't drop a bomb like that in front of cameras unless you want to fire." He knew exactly what he was doing. The public nature of the marriage created a paradox. By making it an event, Kirk turned a private decision into a public debate. Every person who watched Love and Hip Hop felt invited to judge, to grieve, to laugh, to speculate. In reality TV, that's both the engine and the curse. You share enough of your life that when something seismic happens, you don't get to decide who reacts. Everyone does as the week ended. One thing became clear. This story wasn't going away. It wasn't a scandal that would burn out in a weekend. It had roots, emotional, legal, professional, and those roots were going to produce consequences, whether anyone wanted them or not. Hashtag Kirk Frost, hashtag Jasmine Washington, hashtag RASHEEDA, hashtag Love and Hip Hop ATL. At VH1, at Rasheeda, at Frost117, at Jasmine_Washington by the time the second weekend after the announcement arrived. The situation had taken on a strange duality. Public drama with private consequences. Everyone was talking, but the core group, Kirk, Rasheeda, Jasmine, had still not said anything in their own words. That silence created a vacuum, and vacuums on the internet don't stay empty. They fill with speculation, projection, and word. And sometimes straight-up fiction.PR consultants, some hired, some just commenting from the sidelines, began offering advice through podcasts and tweets. They talked about damage control, about controlling the narrative, about owning your truth. Some of it was textbook public relations theory, but some of it got personal. One consultant tweeted, "No matter how you feel about Kirk, if you're in his shoes, your best move is transparency. Secrets hurt more than facts." Reality TV alumni from other shows began chiming in. Some empathized with Rasheeda publicly. Others, perhaps mindful of not burning bridges with producers, kept their comments neutral. Still a few interviews made. Headlines. A former cast member told an urban entertainment blog, "This isn't about TV anymore. This is about trust." If I were Rasheeda, I'd be reevaluating everything, not just the marriage. The legal angle gained more traction. Court. Reporters confirmed that as of the week after the announcement, no divorce filings from Rasheeda had hit public databases. That absence of paperwork set off another round of debates. Was she preparing quietly? Was there still a chance, however slim, that she'd try to work things out privately within the entertainment law community? Hypothetical discussions started popping up. Rasheeda and Kirk own businesses together, which they do. How does a sudden remarriage affect ownership, liability, and brand valuation? People who never cared about Frost Bistro or pressed ATL were suddenly acting like analysts on cable news, breaking down every possible angle. Meanwhile, in real time, the human side kept unfolding. A source close to Rasheeda described evenings where friends came over, sat quietly, let her cry, let her vent, and reminded her to eat. Another source said Kirk had sent multiple messages apologizing not for the marriage itself, but for the way he announced it. He says he didn't mean to humiliate her, the source claimed. He says he thought she already suspected and that saying it in public would make it cleaner somehow. It didn't. That same week, paparazzi caught Jasmine in public for the first time since the announcement. The photos showed her leaving a salon, sunglasses on, expression unreadable. The comment sections were brutal, every frame interpreted through whatever storyline the reader wanted to believe. Some comments were supportive, some venomous. It was a reminder that in public scandals, very few people get to just live quietly. Every step becomes a performance, whether they wanted to or not. Behind the scenes, the show's production calendar began to shift. Meetings with network executives increased. Editors started rough cuts of whatever footage they could use to build context around this twist. But even the network's biggest champions admitted privately that they were nervous. "This isn't a fight you can film and then move on from," one insider said. "This is a foundational shift. Whole storylines, whole relationships, whole dynamics just got rewritten overnight." Social media started doing what it always does, splintering into micro-communities. Some fans organized hashtag campaigns in support of Rasheeda. Posting photos, clips, and messages meant to drown out the negativity. Others leaned into conspiracy theories, suggesting the entire thing was orchestrated months in advance to rescue ratings. A few began focusing on the child at the center of Kirk and Jasmine's original drama, asking whether anyone was thinking about how all of this affected him. Psychologists weighed in on morning shows, offering generic but sincere advice about coping with public betrayal. Bloggers used words like iconic and tragic in the same sentence. And through it all, Rasheeda's public accounts stayed quiet except for a single, neutral post about her boutique's new arrivals. A post that got more comments about her personal life than about the clothes. The wider entertainment industry took notice too. Other networks watched closely, some with concern, some with interest. Reality TV thrives on heightened stakes, but no one wants to be accused of exploiting trauma too far. There's a fine line between documenting reality and capitalizing on pain. And this situation danced dangerously close to that line by midweek. Rumors surfaced that Rasheeda might do a sit-down interview, not a reunion taping, but a controlled conversation with someone she trusted. Whether it would be with a network partner, a YouTube journalist, or an independent podcast was still unknown. People who know her said she wanted to speak, but only when she was sure she could do it without breaking down or saying something she'd regret later. Kirk, according to separate sources, had begun quietly reaching out to mutual business contacts, trying to assure them that partnerships, restaurants, and sponsorships were still secure. He's trying to keep the professional side from collapsing while the personal side burns. One acquaintance said, Jasmine, for her part, remained almost completely off-grid. No new posts, no public sightings beyond that one paparazzi moment. Whether by design or by exhaustion, she seemed to have chosen invisibility as her shield, as part 4 of this ongoing story closed in the public eye. One reality became clear. There was no easy fix. This wasn't the kind of drama that could be smoothed over with a reunion episode, a few apologies, and a contract extension. It's too many people, too many feelings, too many stakes were in motion. And for viewers, fans who had laughed, cried, and tweeted through years of love and hip-hop Atlanta, it felt like the ground beneath the franchise had shifted. What had been entertainment now felt like a documentary of real, unfiltered heartbreak playing out in real time, with no guarantee of a happy ending. #Kirk Frost, #Jasmine Washington, #RASHEEDA, #LoveandHipHopATL. #Reality TV at VH1, at Rasheeda, at Frost117, at Jasmine_Washington by the time a second week turned into a third. What had started as shock began to harden into something more permanent: choices. In every major reality TV controversy, there comes a point where the people involved stop reacting and start deciding. For Rasheeda, that meant quietly taking meetings with both personal advisors and lawyers. According to people familiar with her inner circle, she wanted clarity on 3 things: her children's emotional safety, her business stability, and what, if anything, she owed the public. Public betrayal brings private grief. But in Rasheeda's case, it also came with public pressure. Millions of people felt like they had a stake in what she did next. Fans tweeted suggestions like a live Talal, a revenge album, a book deal, a break from television. Friends told her to take her time. Industry colleagues reminded her that anything she said could shape negotiations for years. Kirk's world was equally complicated. People close to him described a man trying to balance 2 competing realities, one in which he'd chosen Jasmine and believed it, was the right decision for his personal peace, and one in which he still wanted to avoid permanent damage to Rasheeda, their businesses, and their kids. "He's not out there celebrating," said one acquaintance. "It's more like he made a move and is now realizing just how many walls that move knocked down." Jasmine's camp remained silent. That silence had begun to attract as much attention as any statement could have. In some corners of the internet, people argued that it was a sign of maturity, an acknowledgement that no good could come from public victory laps. Others accused her of hiding behind silence to avoid accountability. Whatever the motivation, the absence of noise created more noise. On social media, a secondary conversation emerged, not about the scandal itself, but about what it revealed. The fragile line between entertainment and exploitation, between consent and intrusion, between a fan base's curiosity and the right of the cast to experience private pain privately. Some longtime viewers admitted that this saga made them uncomfortable, even guilty. "We asked for drama," one fan tweeted, "but this feels like trauma. There's a difference." Journalists picked up on that shift in tone. Articles appeared in outlets that usually ignore reality TV gossip. They talked about parasocial relationships, about how shows like Love and Hip Hop turn real lives into narrative arcs, and how those arcs don't stop evolving when cameras do. Some commentators wondered aloud whether the show had a responsibility to step back, to protect rather than produce, even if that meant sacrificing ratings. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, day-to-day life kept moving. Kids still went to school, restaurants still opened, boutique deliveries still arrived. But people in the orbit of this trio described a tension that sat in every room, a silent acknowledgement that nothing would ever go back to exactly what it had been. By week 3, a few new facts emerged quietly. Court documents showed that Rasheeda and Kirk had indeed begun the legal process of separating months before the announcement. They weren't yet divorced when he married Jasmine, but they were, according to filings, negotiating terms. That revelation softened some of the harsher public criticism. It suggested that the emotional betrayal was still real. But the legal picture was less shocking than it had seemed. Still, it's the way it was done, the timing, the setting, the lack of warning, continued to dominate conversation. Therapists and relationship coaches weighed in on Instagram Lives, not offering judgment, but context, about closure, about respect, about how ending one chapter doesn't mean tearing it up in public. Those conversations found an audience beyond Love and Hip Hop fans, tapping into universal questions about dignity and betrayal. A few cast members eventually broke their silence, carefully. One posted a vague tweet about protecting your energy. Another liked supportive comments on Rasheeda's Instagram without saying anything directly. It was a balancing act. No one wanted to exploit the moment, but silence could be read as complicity. And in the reality TV economy, perception is its own currency. VH1 kept things measured. They neither confirmed nor denied future plans for filming. Instead, they let the storm run its course, perhaps knowing that every tweet, every think piece, every whispered update only deepened audience investment. Whether anyone liked that or not, offline, the people involved kept living. Friends described Rasheeda as stronger than people think. Someone who still laughed with her kids, still made business decisions, still checked in on her staff. "She's not broken," one friend said. "She's hurt." Big difference. Kirk reportedly spent more time at neutral locations, staying out of public nightlife, focusing instead on logistics, lawyers, contracts, paperwork. People who know him say he has moments of regret about how it was handled, if not about the choice itself. He says he wanted a clean slate, an acquaintance shared, but admits now that how you leave matters as much as where you go. Jasmine's only public gesture was a quiet appearance at a charity event, where she avoided questions but smiled for photos. It was a reminder that life doesn't freeze. Even when the internet is screaming, by the end of that third week, the story's shape was clearer, even if its future wasn't. It wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a consequence. A decision had been made, a public wound had opened, and now everyone involved was figuring out how to live with what couldn't be undone, and fans. They were still watching, not out of morbid curiosity alone, but because once you've been part of a story this long, you want to see how it ends. Not just the drama, but the healing. 2.hash. Kirk Frost hashtag Jasmine Washington hashtag RASHEEDA hashtag reality TV hashtag healing journeys. At VH1, at Lavonde Hip Hop, at Rasheeda, at Frost117. At Jasmine_Washington, by the time a month had passed, the energy around the scandal had shifted. From pure reaction to something closer to processing. Not everyone had moved on, not even close, but the tempo slowed. Social media feeds that had been dominated by theories, memes, and raw emotion began to include more balanced commentary, small updates, even moments of empathy. It didn't mean the hurt was gone. It meant the noise was settling into the kind of quiet that people need if they're going to rebuild. For Rasheeda, that quiet was both relief and challenge. Relief, because it gave her space to make decisions without every hour bringing a new trending topic. Challenge, because silence also meant that she had to decide, was she going to stay in the reality TV machine that had turned a personal fracture into a national talking point? Or was she going to pivot, maybe take her story, her dignity, and her business empire in a new direction? Friends close to her described long phone calls, strategy sessions, tears mixed with laughter. One said, she's grieving, yes, but she's also designing. It's Rasheeda. She doesn't sit still in pain forever. She builds through it. Kirk, according to people who still answer his calls, was in logistics mode. He'd married Jasmine. That part wasn't going to change. But he was now dealing with the ripple effects. Property-owned businesses, appearances, future seasons, sponsorships. The complicated thing about building a personal brand together is that untangling it isn't just emotional. It's contractual. Lawyers don't work in feelings. They work in clauses, timelines, and signatures. And behind every contract was a question. How much public access was too much now? How many details could safely go on camera without hurting kids, brands, or even basic safety? Jasmine remained, by design, a ghost in the conversation. A single social media story here, a neutral post there, nothing inflammatory, nothing revealing. If she was celebrating, it was off-grid. If she was struggling, no one outside her tightest circle knew. That kind of silence was rare in the love and hip-hop ecosystem. It created a paradox. The less she said, the more people speculated. But the longer she said nothing, the more some fans began to leave her alone. It was as if even the audience got tired of shouting into a void. Producers from the network eventually made their move. A proposal was drafted, not a sensational reunion, but a sit-down special framed not as drama, but as a reflective conversation. The pitch, according to people briefed on it, was simple. Give the audience closure, but on the cast's terms. Let Rasheeda, Kirk, and possibly Jasmine speak with boundaries, not bait. Whether anyone would say yes remained unclear, but the existence of the pitch showed that even a network built on chaos understood there were human limits. The culture around the story had also evolved. At first, it was gossip. Then it became commentary. By month's end, it was almost case study about marriage under a spotlight. About what betrayal looks like when magnified by millions. About the cost of turning private pain into public currency. College students were writing essays about it. Podcasts that usually cover politics or sociology began referencing it as an example of relationship narratives in modern media. Somehow, what began as a bombshell announcement had become a mirror not just for the cast, but for the people watching. Meanwhile, Rasheeda quietly returned to work. Boutique openings, product launches, meetings with distributors, cameras, if they were there, kept a respectful distance. Her tone in public posts shifted, No denial of the past, but no feeding it either. Thank you for the love. I see you. Now let's get back to what we build, she wrote in one caption. Thousands liked it. Many commented with hearts. Few inevitably tried to drag the conversation back to the scandal. She didn't respond. Kirk was spotted twice in public with Jasmine. Both times low-key. No red carpets, no nightclubs, just errands. The photos were grainy, the expressions unreadable. Comment sections lit up anyway, debating every micro-expression like forensic analysts. But even there, fatigue had set in. Y'all still obsessed? One fan wrote under a gossip repost. Let them deal with their lives. In the quiet spaces where the cameras weren't and the hashtags didn't reach. Healing, messy, nonlinear, unpredictable healing was starting. Not reconciliation necessarily, but adjustment. Children were adapting to new routines. Coworkers were finding new ways to communicate. Friends were learning when to talk and when to simply sit nearby. And for the people at the center, every day was a reminder that fame amplifies everything. Joy, pain, mistakes, even redemption by now. Even some of the harshest critics had softened. Not because they approved, but because distance does what? Time always does. It turns volume down enough for nuance to come back in. The outrage never fully disappeared, but it made space for compassion, even curiosity about what growth might look like from here. As Part 6 closes, there are still no perfect answers, no neatly wrapped finale, no sudden clarity about who was. Right or wrong, there are just humans, visible and vulnerable, trying to live with the weight of choices made under bright lights. In a culture that asks for both authenticity and entertainment, but rarely forgives the collision of the two. Kirk Frost. Hashtag Jasmine Washington, hashtag RASHEEDA, hashtag healing, hashtag reality TV. At VH1 at Lava and Hip Hop ATL, at Rasheeda at Frost117, at Jasmine_Washington, and that's where the story stands right now. Raw, unresolved, human. We've seen a marriage, a betrayal, a new union. And the emotional wreckage that comes when private lives get pulled through public filters. It's bigger than a headline. It's a reminder that the people on our screens are still people when the cameras turn off, capable of hurting, capable of healing, and always walking the tightrope between their truth and our curiosity. So now it's your turn. What do you think happens next? Does Rasheeda rebuild, rebrand, and rise above it all? Do Kirk and Jasmine find peace beyond the chaos? Or will this chapter spark an even bigger twist? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with the friends who've been following since day one. And hit follow so you don't miss what happens when real life, love, and legacy collide on and off screen. Hashtag Love and Hip Hop ATL. Hashtag Kirk Frost. Hashtag Jasmine Washington. Hashtag RASHEEDA.